Welcome to Amra's Armchair Anecdotes. I'm Amra, writer, teacher, and storyteller. Pull up a chair and let's dive into stories about writing, life, and lessons learned, sharing wisdom from my armchair to yours. You can find the episode show notes, your free episode handouts, and my how-to guides at amrapaolich.com/podcast. Now it's time to dive in. Welcome to this highlights reel from season 2 of Amra's Armchair Anecdotes, episodes 21 to 30. I'm Amra Paolich, writer, teacher, and storyteller. And across these 10 episodes, we go deep into the realities that most people don't talk about. The science of trauma, the messy economics of indie publishing, art therapy, and unconventional health choices, sustainable living that works, and the real cost of showing up as a creative in midlife. From a memoirist unpacking intergenerational trauma to the team at Ingram Spark demystifying print on demand, Season 2 is about honest conversations. Pull up a chair and let's get into it. In episode 21, I sit down with Ruth Clare, a memoirist, speaker, and the voice behind the award-winning book Enemy, to talk about growing up with a Vietnam veteran father and the trauma that echoes long after the war ends. We get into the science of the fawn response, why children are so often the hidden targets of domestic violence, and how Ruth turned her fear into fuel for her writing, her advocacy, and her nervous system. If you've ever wondered how the body keeps score, this one's for you.
Where they're investigating domestic violence rates in military populations. And they've only just recently found that in transition veteran families, domestic violence rates as high as 45%.
Wow, that is huge.
45%.
That's incredible. So basically 1 in 2.
There is no... Enemy is the first book written by the child of a veteran talking about generational trauma from a non-fiction perspective. It's always alluded to.
Yes.
But it's never been really studied. And I think that is just mind-blowing to me. It still is mind-blowing to me. I continue to check and go, why millions and millions of people are children of veterans? Millions and millions of them have experienced family violence. The direct correlation between military experience and family violence is only now just being explored, researched.
And there's a reason for that, in a sense, where that's not a good news story for people to be signing up for these things.
That is exactly it.
Yes, so there's the politics behind it.
That's exactly it. I can tell you now, defense is...
22, art therapist Vicky E. Sturgianis joined me for one of the most unexpected conversations of the season. After 30 years teaching art across 3 continents, Vicky now blends psychology and creativity to help people heal. And she's also a proud carnivore, so we go there too. We talk mandalas, teaching EAL to adult migrants, writing a children's book, and why she says creativity, passion, and a bit of courage are non-negotiable. Equal parts art therapy and dietary rebellion.
My palate is really sensitive now. Because I haven't been eating anything but meat, fish and eggs for the last 3 years. I haven't touched, I should say this to the audience,
Yes.
I haven't touched a vegetable or a piece of fruit for 3 years.
Well, that leads me to a slightly indelicate question, but I'm curious to, we talk about you need fruits and you need veggies for fiber to work your digestive system. How does that all work?
Well, that's a myth.
Yeah.
According to the doctors that I follow.
In episode 23, I spoke to indie author P.L. Matthews, or Paula, who writes cozy urban fantasy mysteries set right here in Sydney, and she talked about what it actually takes to write full-time. We get into the messy middle of a manuscript, building a writing community, working with translators to reach readers overseas, and why audiobooks are opening new doors for indie authors. Honest, funny, and full of chai tea-fueled wisdom for anyone chasing the indie dream.
It seems to be like the pinnacle, the aim. And I still have people coming to me and say, oh, so you're waiting until a traditional publisher comes to you. My answer is no. Not only am I not waiting, if they do come in, like you say, I'm not going to sell. the whole
No, like you would really
set of
be
rights.
looking at that contract with a
Yeah.
fine-toothed comb. When I started indie publishing, I actually created myself as a small press. So I registered my business name and created a website, which is now my shop. And I published my husband, who's also an award-winning short story writer. So I'm like, I am a small press. And so that's how I'm positioning myself, even though I don't have the capacity. In episode 24, Renee Robertson doesn't just talk sustainability, she lives it. Her all-electric home became the launch site for Victoria's Electric Home Planner pilot. And she was flown to Canberra as one of the 20 women lobbying for 1 million electrified Australian homes and what it really costs and saves to live sustainably in a country still catching up.
They've completely gone down. Now's a really good time to buy EVs. And if I had the opportunity, if I had a crystal ball, I probably would have held for another couple of years, because now you can buy a brand new car for less than I paid for my second-hand car with a better range and stuff. So it's one of those things though that you've got to, it's because I was an early adopter of EVs and that type of thing. It's helped new buyers now with prices and it's helped put infrastructure in place for these new electric vehicle drivers as well. So it's one of those things that you kind of weigh up. Personally, I would have been better off just delaying it a few years if I could, but I'm still pleased that I did to make that switch when I did, because I think it's an important kind of example for other people to invest personally invest in electrifying their homes.
In episode 20, multidisciplinary artist Tor Roxburgh has published 17 books, paints and sculpts, and co-hosts a tech podcast. So naturally, we talk about everything, from using AI as a creative partner to the ethics of indie publishing, from radical acceptance to redefining success on her terms. Tor brings fearless honesty to the messy business of making art for decades without burning out.
It's the concept that matters. And you learn that that's the case with visual art also. And you think of those famous artists who actually don't touch the material at all. They have the idea and they have assistants who make the work. So there's all sorts of possibilities for being creative.
Yeah, that's the whole thing, like that whole thing of idea versus execution, because everyone can have idea. And to go back to our earlier discussion about AI, it doesn't matter. You have the idea, but it's the execution that is only you.
Yeah. I mean, I think execution is part of the idea, I would argue, because if I decide that I'm going to paint a painting of flowers, that's kind of meaningless. I have to have a much more complete vision than that. If I use some technological assistance to do that, it's still got to be a more complete vision of mine to result in something that's worth looking at, I think, anyway.
Episode 26. After 2 decades in the classroom, Kelly Neeson walked away from teaching to become an author coach, and she's here to talk about why. We dig into the leap from steady salary to small creative business.
There is that thing, and you hear it, this is a very, very common complaint amongst children's authors who do school visits, is the schools say, we'd love you to come along to book week. And then when the author goes, okay, it'll cost this much, he's like, oh, you charge. It's like, well, I don't do this for the love of it. We thought, you make money from it. It's like, no, authors make money. Their money comes, their breadwinning comes from doing public appearances.
Yes.
And
all
being
the other
paid
things.
for those.
Yeah, because most of my income was coming from freelance writing and doing workshops.
Yeah. Work to support our writing habit.
Yeah. and it gets and like I've been invited to festivals, and I'm like, oh, I'm invited to a festival, and then they're like, it's for free. I'm like, darling, that's a 2-hour. Episode 27. Novelist, structural editor, and busy bird publishing mentor Les Zig has seen writing from both sides of the desk, as the author wrestling with rejection and the publisher deciding what gets a yes. We talk about why most writers think they're ready to publish before they are, the habits that actually finish books, and how AI and self-publishing are reshaping who gets to call themselves an author.
The other thing too with writing is I've known and experienced writers who they ditch what they're writing because it starts to feel like hard work, or they get bored of their story, or it's frustrating. And it's like, you know what? That's what's going to happen. You're writing an 80,000 word novel. You're not going to love it every word. There are going to be days you sit there and just loathe it. There are going to be days you're thinking, why am I wasting my time? There are going to be days you think, I should just delete this. I should just be done with it. And you just have to teach yourself to just work your way through that. Like, I compare it a lot to relationships. You know, if you have a long-term relationship, there's times your partner frustrates you and annoys you or does all that sort of stuff. But if the relationship's right, you always come back to the love of it. And it's the same thing as writing. You are going to get those moments that aren't as positive, but just keep pushing through because you'll find your way back to it if your relationship to your story is right.
Agree with so many things that you're saying, because this is a conversation that always, it's like, we all do, and you have to really sacrifice and dedicate time. When I was doing my PhD and had a 5-year-old and I was working full-time as a teacher, I had to wake up at 5:30 in the morning in order to write. There was no ifs or buts about it. That was the time that I could do it. And so that's when I did it. Episode 28, author and writing coach Violeta Matijevich-Bagia joins me to talk about the cost of writing trauma, literally and emotionally. We cover traditional versus independent publishing, the role therapy plays in her creative process, and why she believes writing about pain doesn't heal you, but it can change you. We also get into perimenopause boundaries and the self-care writers skip at their own peril.
And that is so important. I never had that because I had this ingrained, just be polite, smile, do whatever the adult says because that's the way it's done.
Yes.
Right? And
Our
so
culture. You kiss people. They force you. You hug them. You shut up. If they put you on their lap, you have to be quiet and you have to be. So they're basically training you to be biddable. And that is the children that are, in a sense, magnets for predators.
Exactly. And that's what happened to me. I was 18, fell into a relationship with this guy who said all the right things, did all the right things. And even when it was something I didn't want to do or was uncomfortable to say no, I couldn't do it because
while still holding down a full-time job the whole way.
They're after escape. The reality of what we're living through at the moment is tough. It's really tough.
To close out season 2, I was joined by Madeline and Chris from Ingram Spark Australia to demystify print-on-demand publishing. We cover how indie authors actually get stocked in bookstores, why metadata can make or break discoverability, the proofreading mistakes that cost sales, and how translation and customizable print editions are opening indie books to a genuinely global market.
The only other thing I wanted to say is as Maddie said, some of the beautiful books that come through, but also the way that print on demand and having access to this is doing really important things in the broader community. Like, we have a beautiful book that's from Wingaru Education, Indigenous publisher based up in Sydney, and their book is a beautiful children's book, and it's based on the Darug language in the Western Sydney Basin, and it's a means of preserving this language with, if you think of, all of the 250 odd dialects of different languages, Indigenous languages around Australia, and some of these are in danger of disappearing. So books are a great way of preserving this language by, once that book is in a file, in a digital file, it will exist forever. So beautiful things like that we see, Amra, which is really, encouraging and a great use of, I guess, all the tools that are available.
Yeah. And I think just to go back to what you were saying, Madeline, in terms of Arabic, Ingram Spark also has the option, because Arabic is read from right to left. And so you've actually got the option where you choose that it gets printed in that way. Thank you for tuning into Amra's Armchair Anecdotes. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and follow for more insights, stories, and inspiration from my armchair to yours. Remember, every story begins with a single word.